What's the question?
If you want to push me on a single cause, I can explain to you the complexities of any particular cause. So for instance, we can talk about housing being a complex issue. Housing is complicated primarily because the people that live in a certain district are already gonna be ultra privileged being in houses. So in order to uproot them, you necessarily have to act in an undemocratic fashion to do it.
First judge is John Zerka. He is voted in favor of infrared. The purpose of this, of course, is for you two to debate the topic. Should Americans vote for the Democratic Party? And if there's any more questions about rules or regulations, the only last thing I could say is that afterwards, of course, a 3-judge panel will decide who gets the championship belt mailed to them after this debate. So, is everybody ready?
As ready as we'll ever be.
Wonderful. So, since Infrared is the challenger for the belt, I will give him first word on should people vote for the Democratic Party.
So to begin, hold on, wait, someone's at the door. You need to...
Okay, Destiny. I can't mess with it's mind games.
Hey, how's it going?
We're going great.
Hello.
How you guys doing?
We're
Doing
doing
good.
great.
What's the question?
Should people vote for Democrats?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Okay, if that's the intro, Destiny, now you can start with yours.
That's the intro. I'll do my intro. We should not vote for Democrats because at the end of the day, Democrats are only another arm of the corporate oligarchy. They're furthering the imperialist wars. They are crippling more Americans.
I can't hear anything you're saying. Your mic is really fucking up.
Is it too loud?
Yeah, it's the gain is immense.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
The Democratic Party is furthering the crippling of the American public. They're further indebting them. They're driving us into more imperialist wars. They are causing us to not have health care, not have free public tuition. They're preventing all of the basic necessities we need to have a prosperous society. Yet they're all running under the guise of supporting these things, and they're sheepdogging more people into the Democratic Party in an effort to co-opt the movement. And at the end of the day,
Oh wait, did they set
only
me up to
further
debate this guy?
isolate
Is that?
people from actually achieving any of these goals?
Oh shit!
So,
it's like the Ethan
I
shit.
think if you look at the actual policies that have been failed to have been passed but have been supported
Oh
by
my
different
God, dude.
candidates, you can see that they've lied time and time again about the things that they say they support.
Okay.
And even then, some
Where's
of the things
Melina
that they
at?
do say they support from the get-go, such as wars with Taiwan or wars with China over Taiwan, or supporting public options that will only further decimate the healthcare industry, the healthcare plan in this country to guarantee universal healthcare to all people. It's only going to hurt more Americans, and that's what they do.
Okay, Destiny, your intro statement.
Voting for third parties is a waste of time. None of them have a shot at making it anywhere. The only thing that's good for third parties is getting Twitter clout or having fun debates, I guess, on Twitch or YouTube. If you truly want to support things like a more robust economy that supports workers at the bottom, healthcare that works for everybody and not just people that can afford the best private insurance, relatively less hawkish foreign policy, people that support things around medical science. So for instance, stuff related to vaccines or the coronavirus. If you want to support people's right to vote, if you want to support the ability for unions to exist, and if you want to support a party that believes in climate change, I think that it's probably more important to support the Democratic Party than to throw away your vote on some meme third party that doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of holding any effective office. I think that if third parties really wanted to build real power in this country, they would spend more time actually winning local elections to build real support for their movement, instead of just doing this Hail Mary for the presidency every year where they can raise some money, have absolutely no effective change, and then write a bunch of books later on about the failures of their parties and all the excuses they make for it. And yeah, that's what we're here to talk about today, I guess.
Love my Steve.
Okay, it is now open dialogue. You two are free to go back and forth. You may begin.
Well, I think Destiny begins from the presupposition that the Democrats are the only ones who support this, and that no one else actually has a chance. I'm curious to know why Destiny thinks he knows a third party is actually not possible. Given the history of the United States, the Republicans and Democrats haven't always existed, and there's actually a precedent in monumental historical shifts, political shifts within the United States. And historical shifts within the United States. Third parties and alternative parties to the status quo do happen in the history of the United States. Shifts in the even the political alignment of parties happen in these kinds of decisive historical moments. And I think you would really have to be a complete, either a liar or someone who's burying their head under the sand to deny the fact that right now in this country we are facing a decisive historical transformation, a political realignment, and one such moment that precisely makes an alternative third party possible. Now, you can, deny and dismiss that all you want, but to go out of your way to say that a third party actually isn't possible and that the only choice we have is between the Republicans and the Democrats, I think that's an unfounded assumption.
So typically, if political parties are going to build their power, it's not going to be a Hail Mary winning of the presidential election. And then all of a sudden, this third political party is more popular. If there was a third party that was legitimately gaining steam, then, I mean, maybe there might be talk of supporting them in the future. But I was here when people thought libertarians could win against Obama, when people supported Ron Paul, back with Bush and the Green Party, people were talking. There was Ross Perot. I mean, against Trump, you've seen like third party, Gary Johnson, like there have been all these third party candidates that have kind of sprung up and they can get like 1% of the vote or 2% of the vote. But like ultimately they're ineffective. You can see the writing on the wall. You're never going to have like a mysterious, like explosive, oh my God, out of nowhere, this third party candidate wins. I think that if third parties want to build real power, they should probably focus doing it on the city or at least state level before they just try to make these big runs for the presidency when most people in the United States consider those third parties to be a joke.
Okay, well, there's two things actually. The first argument I'd like to point out is that historically speaking, the emergence of the Republican Party was precise. The Republican Party didn't emerge because they were slowly winning at the local level and then eventually it created because there was a discernible political distinction and difference that was within the prevailing party, and it was precisely by winning the presidency that the Republican Party was boosted into relevance and significance historically. So historically speaking, that's just not true. Third parties, or whatever you want to call them, alternative parties, have won historically on the basis of these kinds of so-called Hail Marys. But even if we discount that fact, I personally don't think people should necessarily rely on a so-called Hail Mary. I think that a party does require work at local levels. It does require dedication and energy and building foundations and infrastructure, and it requires the maturity to be able to have a big tent third party. This is the most important part, that's going to be able to overcome, the kind of petty political sectarianism that you see so common among the left, and just be able to focus on getting this third party to win. But on the other hand, if the question is about, and we're addressing this to the audience, should you vote Democrat? My view is a decisive no. And the reason why is because you should be focusing your effort on building a third party. And even if that means taking your energy and attention away from these, congressional and presidential elections, if a third party is going to start winning locally, that also implies a broader information and propaganda war that allows you to draw a line of distinction. You can't, on the one hand, campaign at a local level and say, oh, let's vote for this third party, but on the other hand, shill for the Democrats when it comes to the national level in terms of propaganda and optics. So just to be able to distinguish yourself enough sufficiently, even if you're just going to focus on local levels, you do have to make a stance when it comes to these very broad, unifying political moments where, American politics is really defined at the level of the presidential elections, whether we like that or not, just at the level of optics, information, and propaganda. So if you're going to distinguish yourself as a third party, you cannot say, oh, let's vote for Biden, or oh, let's swallow our pride and vote for the Democrats. You have to take a stance, even just as a matter of optics, in those such moments. So to whoever it may concern, right? And I don't think this is going to be like the majority of the American people right now, but those who are interested in politics, young people who do want to see changes in this country, you should focus, and this is true for influencers such as yourself, who go on stream and claim that, you're interested in seeing all these changes happen in this country. it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. It doesn't matter what your specific ideology is or what your specific views are. You should be getting on board with a big tent, focusing on trying to build a big tent, a third party. And I find it especially ironic that Destiny says it's not possible when if streamers like him, influencers like him, got the ball rolling, him, Vaush, Hassan, and all these streamers, I mean, that enough would like blow out of the water all of the other precedent attempts within the past, few decades to build third parties. You already have the media infrastructure to build a political alternative in this country. Like you are yourself a form of alternative media, Destiny, whether you like it or not. You're not a form of mainstream media. So I just
Okay,
find
wait. Do I get a chance to respond to things, or holy shit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Borja.
Okay, I'm trying not to just talk over. So I mean, like, if we want to talk about like political parties from 200 years ago, we can. I mean, if you've got a political party that's ready to absolutely collapse in the United States that doesn't enjoy like a massive amount of popularity, which the Democratic and the Republican Party do, I mean, we can do that. But I mean, it took the Whig Party collapsing, right, in like the fucking 1800s in order for the Republican Party to like grow from the ashes of that. To try to say that like the situation is the same today, I know that a lot of people talk like, oh my God, like the parties are collapsing. They're not. They both enjoy like a pretty tremendous amount of support right now. I just don't see either of them collapsing right now. Now, maybe that'll change in a few years. Maybe the party of Trump, maybe we'll come out and support Trump as a third party candidate. Who knows? I mean, that's anything is possible, I guess. It could be. The progressive or left-wing movement in the Democratic Party definitely isn't healthy or large enough to support somebody. But maybe in the Republican Party, maybe we'll see somebody grow out as a result of that. But again, like these political realignments happened like over 150 years ago, right? The Democratic and Republican Party are like 200 years old. I think that any time you're trying to say this is possible and you have to reach back like as a millennia, 100 years, 200 years to try to point to where this has happened before, I think your argument is already starting off on an incredibly rocky foot. Like politics change, the power of the federal government changes, the way that we consume media changes, the way that these parties exist. 2 centuries. The way that these parties exist has changed, like, just so much that I'm not willing to go back 200 years ago and say, well, it worked then, so it should work now. In terms of like, if you vote on third party, does that mean that like you should vote third party even if that means losing elections in the meantime? I don't like that idea because I think that it is a very privileged position to have. There are a lot of people that are hurting right now in the United States that probably don't want to gamble the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years of their life on whatever gambit you have for your fantasy third party that's going to come up and rise up and destroy the United States, or not destroy the United States, but destroy the U.S. like political parties that exist right now. I think that's a pretty selfish thing to demand of people that are hurting right now and need help right now. So, and then also in terms of like, you can't vote third party locally and then presidentially vote different. You absolutely can do that. Local politics are an incredibly diverse landscape of different types of candidates that believe in all sorts of different things. There's even more variety among Republicans and Democrats at the local level, or you can support third parties. And you might even have a better shot doing so. There are plenty of local scenes that support, for instance, open primaries where anybody can make it to like these top 2 or 3 positions. And then you have your citywide or your statewide vote. Like these things exist. There might even be more ripe areas where third party candidates can flourish because the amount of money that you need to raise is way less, and campaigning on key issues to those geographic areas is more successful than trying to make this huge run at the presidential scene. And then even the idea that like you can't vote differently one way and then vote another way for president doesn't make sense, because we saw like on down ballot tickets that there were, for instance, a lot of Republicans that would support Trump but then wouldn't support down ballot Republicans, or there were a lot of Democrats that would support Biden but wouldn't support down ballot Democratic, senators or congressmen. So I think you absolutely can support third-party candidates on local levels while also supporting, a mainstream president or a mainstay like one of the 2 political party presidents, so that you can increase the outcomes of whatever group of people you're advocating for on the presidential level. For the final thing, the idea that like you have to take some stance as a matter of optics. Once more, I think it's a privileged position to be able to wear a political flag optically or rhetorically rather than out of necessity, like a lot of poor people are right now, for instance, that are helped by the child tax credit that exists under Biden that probably wouldn't have come under the Republicans, or, for diabetics that have health insurance that wouldn't have, but they do thanks to the ACA, or, for people who can feel a little bit more secure about their future because they were DACA recipients that aren't constantly being attacked by Trump anymore. These are people that don't have the luxury of wearing a political outfit as like a rhetorical or optical device, but rather they rely on these political parties to secure a safe existence in the United States.
So I discerned 5 points, and I'm just going to respond to each of them, and I'll count them off the top of my hand, right? So the first one was about unless you think the Democratic Party is today about to collapse. I'm actually curious as to your view on what a situation would look like. What would it look like for a party to collapse? Because the way I see it, for example, we're looking at an infrastructure bill that's not embarrassingly can't even be passed, not because of the Republicans, but because of a faction of the Democrats, right? I mean, that's just one example too. The political realignment is so profound today within the two constituent parties. I don't see how you could say, oh yeah, the Democratic Party enjoys widespread popularity. Well, which Democratic Party? Because if you look at the factions within the Democratic Party, it is not a unified party. So I'm curious as to which party you're referring to, because unless you can prove that there's like a, like unifying support for the Democrats in general, like regardless of the differences within them, which is a completely base, like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin's base is not voting for the Democrats for the same reason that Democrats elsewhere are voting for there are really specific class demographic differences and the reasons why people vote Democrat. So I'm curious, what would it look like for a party to collapse? The second thing you said was that there hasn't been a political realignment like the one that happened around the Civil War in 200 years. First of all, that's just not true, right? The Democrats and Republicans only share continuity with those parties historically in all but name today, right? We all know that. The parties have fundamentally changed, and if you look at the origins of the modern Democratic Party, it's actually really interesting. It was because of initiatives like the Populist Party and the Farmers Alliance in the late 19th century and early 20th century that led to this kind of unity between, that led to the synthesis that is the New Deal Democrats, which eventually would be, champion the causes of minorities and stuff. And so you can actually locate two realignments within the 20th century. The first one was the rise of the Democrats as like the party of the New Deal. The second one was around the time of JFK and beyond, where the Democrats increasingly coveted the votes of minorities and demographics like that instead of the traditional working class white base. The third thing you said, and if I've forgotten some of your points, you're going to have to correct me or point out, like you didn't respond to this. The third thing I think you mentioned was that, you have this dream about a third party, but that's coming from a position of privilege, because what about harm reduction? And the thing I find so interesting about arguments about harm reduction is this assumption about the scale of time. Now, if you're talking about voting individually, for the Democrats, in order to reduce, even if there's still going to be harm, it'll be that much different for that. It'll make a difference to real concrete individuals. Well, you're still speaking in terms of like an abstract scale of millions of people. So if you can speak in terms of millions of people at that scale of harm reduction or whatever, why can't you speak in terms of time? What if in the short term people may suffer more, but in the long term you're securing a better future? What if you don't act now and fight for a third-party alternative to the current establishment, future generations are going to be more profoundly harmed than the amount of people who are going to be harmed now? So I'm interested if you can address this issue of the scale of time. The fourth thing I think I heard.
Would it be possible for us to go point by point so we could just have a back and forth?
I'll combine the last two. So you basically said you can still vote local and vote for Democrats at the national level. Well, that's true. You obviously can do that, and I'm not saying, you're morally hypocritical or inconsistent for it, but I'm saying in terms of what would be necessary for building a third party, yes, in terms of the sphere of the information war and optics, you can't be shilling for the Democrats at the national level and then voting for the, then saying, let's vote for the third. You're telling people you're not willing to risk enough for this party. You basically don't believe in it. You believe the current options are the only ones that really exist. And you're saying, that's privileged to focus on optics, because you're not focusing on poor people and doing charity. Well, guess what? Those poor people you're talking about are literally the people who don't fucking vote. So I don't know why if it's about them and you're using them as your excuse and them as your shield, why don't they vote? They don't vote. Overwhelmingly, the people who don't vote are not privileged people. It's the privileged people in this country who go out and vote the most and spread the word that people should vote. Non-privileged people don't give a shit about politics. They don't believe in the system and the establishment. They think it's the two parties are the same thing. In fact, a third party would probably mobilize more currently politically apathetic voters than any other political option on the table. So this is an absurd argument you're leveling. Oh, it's privileged. And then the idea that politics isn't about information and optics. Politics, I'll just say this, in this country, politics is only information plus organization. That's all it is. There's nothing more to politics in this country but optics/information and organization. It's not about charity. It's not about harm reduction. It's not about doing things now so less people suffer. Why don't you sign up personally, Destiny? You should sign up for a soup kitchen instead of sitting on your ass streaming if you're going to talk about, oh, what can I do individually to help the most people? Individually, why don't you give your money to charity? Why don't you work for a soup kitchen? You know, if you want to go down that route and act like that's what politics is about, you know, it's a complete absurdity.
Okay, for going forward, we're going to go point by
Fuck.
point so we don't have like 5 or 10 minute statements. Okay? Destiny?
Okay. I feel like if we do that, I feel like I've lost because now I can't respond to everything that was said, though.
Okay, so we will have you give a 3 to 3.5 minute statement. Then we're going point by point past that. I don't want to have just essays.
Well, but is that fair to Haas? Because then wouldn't he get basically gish galloped then? He wouldn't be able to respond?
Well, see, you got to draw the line somewhere.
Sure, yeah, he spoke like 5 minutes first, okay? So at the very least, I'll do my response and then, okay? So in terms of what would the situation look like for the parties to collapse, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I imagine it probably wouldn't look like a record number of votes for both presidential candidates in the history of the United States of America. It would probably look like less and less people voting, or maybe the rise of third parties in other areas, or I don't know, maybe like an inability to fundraise, or I mean, there are like signs or things where it's like maybe some huge piece of legislation that caused a fracture from a party. Like some people could argue that January 6th was the collapse of the Republican Party because some people left the Republican Party after that. Probably not enough for it to happen, but I mean, there are signs that we could look for a collapse, but whatever those signs are, we absolutely don't see them now. It's not YouTube people saying that like, oh my God, these parties suck. They're both the same. When we talk about how the infrastructure bill can't be passed because of Democrats, this is just like the dumbest thing that anybody could possibly ever say. We are split 50-50 right now. We are fighting for votes 49 and 50 on the Democratic side. We're not fighting for any of the 50 Republicans that are standing against this piece of legislation. It is not the Democrats that are preventing the bill from being passed. It is 50 Republicans plus 1 or 2 incredibly moderate or conservative Democrats that are in the way of this infrastructure bill being passed. To try to say that it's the same, to try to say that the Democrats are preventing it from being passed, just shows like a misunderstanding of how our legislative bodies work. There's not a single Republican willing to come on board with this. Okay, well then you need every single Democrat to come on board with it, which is really hard for what is arguably like the largest piece of legislation since the New Deal. It's a huge piece of legislation. In terms of, again, the party is not a unified party. Can you provide or show like how there's like unifying support? I mean, there were huge turnouts for the presidential election, but in terms of like unifying support, I mean, like a Democrat in one area is not going to be the same as a Democrat in another area. A Republican in one area is not going to be the same as a Republican in another area. But if anything, this is an argument in favor of the ability for a two-party system to work, even with dramatically different voters across the United States. You know, Democrats that support Manchin in West Virginia aren't going to be the same as the most left-leaning Democrats that would support somebody like AOC or Democrats that exist in California. And again, like your argument, you're bringing up a lot of arguments that I think support my system, right? You're saying like the parties have fundamentally changed over time. Of course, the parties have a lot of tenacity, much like how Marx said that capitalism embeds itself into the government and also has abilities to perpetuate itself over long periods of time, preventing the rise of a socialist economy. Political parties also do as well. But this entrenchment of the political parties and their ability to kind of like morph and change and be a little bit flexible as people's opinions change, that's just arguments in favor of them continuing to stand the test of time, as they've had both for like almost like over 150 years for both of them. When we talk about like engaging in harm reduction, it is literally about choosing the lesser of multiple evils. It's not pontificating about an ideal third-party nirvana that might exist 20 years from now that there's absolutely no roadmap for right now in any of the upcoming like federal level elections. I don't know how anybody could say that that's harm reduction. When we talk about like in the short term, you know, people might suffer, but in the long term, maybe we're securing a better future. That's just like, I don't know. In the long term, it could be a fascist dictator dictatorship that rises up after a civil war. I don't know if I would trust the Democrats or left-leaning people in this country to win a civil war against Republicans. No offense. So yeah, this idea that we need to throw away like our current electoral advantage in order to like do this huge gamut for this future that we have zero proof even exists, that we don't even know if there's that much support for these left-leaning parties in the United States. It seems like people like Bernie Sanders would prove that the support that they believe is there just isn't. When you say that you can't shill for Dems at a national level and then vote for a local third party, again, you absolutely can. Your local politics, your local political scene is going to be way different than your national level political scene. I don't know where these statements are born out of, other than just an unfamiliarity with local political scenes. Like, you can have local political people that are Democrats or Republicans that are wildly different in terms of what they support based on the national level. So you can totally support different candidates on a local level and different candidates at a federal level. This is exactly why we talk about down ballot voting and why sometimes it's important and sometimes down ballot votes diverge from the top of the line vote, especially when it comes to presidential elections. When you talk about how poor people don't vote, that's true, but they're still affected by policy. They're absolutely affected by policy. There's a lot of poor people that didn't vote for Biden that are still benefiting off the child tax credit or potentially anything that's coming from the infrastructure bill. And then in terms of like, it maybe a third party will galvanize these people and get out to vote. Third parties exist right now. Bernie Sanders tried this. Like, we're going to get all these people who traditionally don't vote to go out and vote. People say this all the time. We're going to get these people. We're going to mobilize. We're going to get these people to go and vote. It never happens. If there is some third party that can magically mobilize or galvanize these non-voters into like new voters, that'd be great. It would be like a historic thing in order to do that. People have tried. People have failed. And in terms of like, I don't think politics is about running soup kitchens either. If you want to talk about like personal charity or volunteer work, we can talk about that. But that's a fundamentally different question than whether or not we should support third parties.
Okay, now from now on, it's going to be point by point. I just don't want five-minute statements going back and forth. So that's how it's going to be going from this point on.
Okay, very quickly, I'll run down the list. So the reason for the incredible turnout in the recent election,
one point, though,
because anyone believes in the unity of the Democrats and the Republicans, it was a referendum on Trump, and that's all it was. Trump defined American politics at that point. People voted for Biden, not because they believed in a unifying Democratic consensus or they believe in a unified Democratic Party, but because it was a referendum on Trump. That's the only reason you're going to see such high turnout, because Trump has divided this country down the middle. And that's the only thing that unites Democrats at this point, is that they're against Trump.
Well, but then why not? Why couldn't it be a referendum on Trump by going out to vote for a third party?
What do you mean? We don't have a third party doesn't exist right now. There's the infrastructure for one. No one's
careful.
building one right now.
That's my whole argument.
Not enough people are committing to the work of building a third party. You yourself, streamers and influencers who represent alternative media, you are not giving them a chance. You're just shilling for the establishment while possessing the very media infrastructure to make a third party possible. So if you want to ask me, why do we have a third party right now? Well, it's people like me and it's other people who are using their media platforms to try and work for one and get something off the ground. And I just started recently. I don't know how my luck is going to fare, but you already have a really big, sizable platform and a big audience. You could do wonders for a third party yourself, Destiny.
I don't support third parties, so that's why I don't. I use my influence and I try to do things for the Democratic Party.
So hold on, when you say point by point, do you mean like I can't go down the list and address everything, or?
Oh yeah, we're going point by point. We're going point by point. Yes. So you can like move from one point to the next point after you've addressed it. Yeah.
I don't understand how like we think that like the way that third parties are going to rise in the Americas off the backs of YouTubers and Twitch streamers. That seems like a pretty like sad scene for third parties in the United States.
You can call it YouTubers or Twitch streamers, and I'll call it alternative media. But YouTube sounds like a silly website, and it's a silly website on the internet with Minecraft or whatever, PewDiePie. But the truth is that YouTube, and you can read the mainstream media because they themselves will confess this, has been an incredible platform for alternative media. Even alternative media you probably aren't so vehemently opposed to, like the Young Turks, for example. You were probably a Young Turks guy. I mean, your politics was probably defined entirely for many years as being a Young Turks Democrat, right? And that's
absolutely not,
alternative media.
Okay. Alternative media exists. I agree that alternative
progressive movement in the United States after the Obama era, its media was media like the Young Turks and Democracy Now! And these kind of alternative media platforms that were largely on YouTube. So this idea that YouTube isn't a serious platform for alternative media, well, it's just that this alternative media has first emerged on YouTube. Will it always be on YouTube? Probably not, but
sure. But like, let's see, like who's been successful in like making real headway into actual politics from YouTube, right? So you could argue that
I'll give you a good example. The so-called Justice Democrats was an initiative launched by the Young Turks and Kyle Kulinski, and I'm against AOC. I completely oppose.
Sure, but
AOC,
where did they launch that initiative? Where did it go to?
They did it within the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, by the way, is because the Democratic Party already had the fundamental infrastructure, and the Democratic Party was a recognizable party with a base. But we've seen actually how this initiative has turned out, and we see that within the Democratic Party, the Justice Democrats as an initiative failed entirely because we don't have our own independent party with its own independent streams of revenue and its own independent structure that's not going to prevent progressives from being able to take over the party. Very early on, when AOC was elected, the whole mainstream media and the party itself quickly did everything in its power to squash that in its cradle. And at this point, the AOC has been completely co-opted as just another Democrat. So that's not really a good argument for why we shouldn't be doing it for the third party. But regardless,
I think that's an amazing argument. So I mean, like the Justice Dems, like were probably from what I know of, is like the best initiative from an alternative media platform. The Young Turks and Kyle Kalinske, the Justice Dems were able to do it, but they had to do it going the route internal to the Democratic.
Its failure. Let's reflect on the reasons.
Wait. No. You're saying failure, but I don't think it's a failure. They've got like 4 really strong members that are elected. AOC is arguably like the most popular politician in the United States right now.
Politics is about making people's lives better. What has AOC done for the American people that makes it such a successful initiative?
AOC doesn't have the ability to leverage much. So we have these huge misunderstandings of how our legislative. We have. Okay, I'm just gonna start talking. Fuck. Okay.
AOC
so we have this inability to talk about politics in the United States because people like you seem to think that AOC needs to be able to solo change like the legislative course or trajectory of the Democratic Party. We have 50 Democrats in the Senate.
She could make maybe she can do like a little bit of help, but AOC has only done harm for the Democrats, actually. AOC has been an optics disaster for Democrats and a propaganda ammunition for the Republicans at this point. Even as a Democrat, you can't say AOC is an example of someone's success. It's not. AOC has been a disaster for them. Like, maybe Trump could have won in 2020 because of politicians like AOC were so divisive in this country. AOC was the face of like the wing of the Democrats that precisely has no chance whatsoever from reaching out to Trump's constituent base and these type of people that Biden himself was trying to win over. So no, it's not a good example.
I don't know. Like your point is that like AOC hasn't like solo like drafted legislation and pushed it through the House.
I'm like asking her to solo draft legislation. I'm asking her to.
I want to make sure that we have Destiny to finish this point quick.
So like this idea that like she's like people say this over and over and over again. If you want, I guess we can talk about like the structure of the U.S. government. But like, I'm sorry, but again, this shows like the short-sightedness of people that have these huge legislative initiatives and can only get like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people into office. Like, you have to build these caucuses. This shit takes time. This shit takes real work. You guys want this fantasy world where out of nowhere you're going to have like 200 people march into Congress thinking that they're all going to be these third-party people to support what you want. That's not how this works. Right now, far left like lawmakers don't really have the leverage they need because right now you barely have a legislative majority in the Senate. If that's the case, you're always going to be appealing to people in the middle that can be lost next election season to the other side. Like AOC can make all the stinks she wants. Her seat's not being taken by a Republican. There's a reason why people like Sinema or why people like Manchin have the leverage in the poll that they do, and it's because they're the ones that exist closest to the center. But if you had a margin of like 52 Dems or 54 Dems and you didn't have to worry as much about that center, then people on the really far left could start making more power plays, where AOC is like, I'm not going to support this piece of legislation until this happens or this happens. And it's like, okay, well, we've got some wiggle room. We got 53, 52 Democrats in here. Like maybe we can start to make appeals to that side of the political aisle. But it's not going to happen right now when you're barely holding Congress.
Hold on. There's 2 things I want to say before you cut me off. And I'm going to try to get it in quick. The first one is, I'm not saying AOC has to propose all this legislation. All I'm saying is she at least should kickstart some kind of change within the Democratic Party, and she hasn't done anything like that, at least for the positive, as far as the ability for the Democrats to win over the people that are voting for Republicans currently now. The second thing is that you basically make this completely contradictory argument. On the one hand, you say, well, third parties are not possible because the current political reality is the only reality. On this one other hand, you say, oh, the reason why, and I wanted to actually get to this point, but apparently we can't, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin have leverage, is because there's not enough Democrats that have a majority over the Republicans. But that's implying that the reason for that isn't because of these objective political realities of populations in the United States who will never vote for the Democrats and will stick on the Republicans. It's this idea that the reason why it's such a slim majority right now is because there's not enough politically minded young people who are going out and voting for the Democrats. I completely reject that view. I think the reason why it's split down the middle is because this country is actually split down the middle. And for you to say, and I really want to address this point, for you to say that the Democrats, it's not the Democrats' fault because they can't pass the infrastructure bill, is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. The Democrats are the ones, it's a given Republicans are going to oppose it. The Democrats have a majority now. As a party, they're supposed to act in a unified way if it's a unified party, and yet it's because of a faction of the Democrats that you're not getting this bill passed. You can't blame the Republicans because you already told people to vote for Democrats as an alternative to the Republicans, so they voted Democrat, so much to the point that the Democrats have a majority, but now you're saying, oh, that's not enough. The Democrats have to have an even more bigger majority. Well, how much wiggle room is there for Democrats to win when, how much ability is there for Democrats to win over these Trump-supporting Republicans to the point where, you can keep making these excuses? I don't buy it. I don't think it's going to happen. You're not going to win over these Trump people as a Democrat. And that seems self-evident and obvious to me. You're just going to, the country's divided down the middle. And I don't see how you've addressed that in any way, even. How can you address the current political contradiction?
I don't know what the contradiction is. So, like, you say, for instance, like, Democrats have a majority, but they're supposed to act in a unified way. But then it sounded like earlier you were saying that, like, the Democrat Party isn't unified. It's got a ton of different people that exist under the wing of the Democratic Party.
It's not unified.
So this is the point, right? If you have 50 Democrats in office, not every single Democrat is going to have the same legislative initiatives as every other Democrat. A Democratic senator from West Virginia is going to be far different than a Democratic senator from California. The way that they're going to vote
is one of those things that defines the unity of the Democrats as a party, especially in this political moment where it's a test of whether the Democrats can pass bills, right?
Yeah, but Joe Manchin is not the Democratic Party. Sinema is not
the same party if you don't agree to pass this infrastructure bill.
I guess we can talk about political strategy because that's what this comes down to. Like, Manchin and Sinema are not going to give up their seats to vote for something that's going to lose them a future election. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just the political reality. People seem to think oh, the Democrats are going to come together and vote. There's only one national level thing that we do in the United States, and that's the presidential election. Otherwise, you've got 50 senators, 2 from each state, and you've got 438 members of the House, and then 1 or 2 from DC that don't do anything. And these people are all trying to win in their individual little districts. Now, we come together under large wings of who we consider Republicans and who we consider Democrats, but that doesn't mean that every single person under that wing is going to vote the exact same way. And when you keep saying, well, they've got a majority, bro, they have, wait, hold on, let me finish responding. You talked for 20 minutes, okay? When you have a quote unquote majority that's literally a tiebreaker by the vice president, you're talking about the slimmest fucking margins in the world. Trump had the exact same problems when he had even bigger margins, when he couldn't repeal and replace the ACA. Like, he ran into similar problems too, where he couldn't get part of his legislative agenda passed. He didn't get the wall done like he wanted to, We have a lot of problems with gridlock right now in the Senate. That's why things like the nuclear option become a problem. That's why we have people trying to get rid of the filibuster. I agree that gridlock is a problem, but you can't say well, look, we got you your 50 senators. Where's all of this key legislation coming from? Because that's not going to happen, because by definition, any political party that includes a ton of people at the very edges is going to have people that are more moderate that are going to have to be catered to when it comes to passing legislation with incredibly slim majorities.
So I don't know why you mentioned Trump having problems too, because it's also my view that the Republican Party is ultimately doomed as well. The Republican Party right now is Trump's party. If it's something beyond Trump's party, then the party is doomed to collapse. So it's Trump's party right now. Any Republican who's not on board with Trump, I don't see having a future within the so-called.
Would you bet on any of this? Would you bet on a third party, senator or president in the past, in the next 4 elections? Or
here's my issue.
Okay.
You keep using this language would you bet on the prospects? Is it going to happen? At what point? I get that there are objective realities in politics. Like you, I'm not a utopian. I don't think that politics is just based on my personal moral views and my personal ideology. I get it. There are objective realities that reject the objective realities of people's sentiments and beliefs or whatever. But at what point does will actually make a difference in politics? At what point do you have to stand up and work for something and build something and fight for something that there doesn't exist any immediate precedent for? If the actual innovators in the history of American politics had your mentality, we would have no change in the history of American politics at all. There would be no Abe Lincoln. There would be no Franklin Roosevelt. There would be no John F. Kennedy, or maybe, if it depends on where you fall on the political spectrum, maybe no Richard Nixon. You have to take risks. You have to fight for some things for which there doesn't exist any immediate precedent for, because you can't keep deferring to what is the current reality. The current reality isn't just objective; it also includes subjective realities.
Yeah,
And
so
there's
the
a
reason
certain
why-
number you have to step in and actually have will in politics.
So the reason why nobody would vote on third parties is because you guys know that they're not a possibility. Like, you won't even vote with odds, right? Like, if I were to ask you, is there a 10% chance that your party will make it? Then I'll give you 10 to 1 odds on somebody like making it into the presidency or like a senator.
I want a third party to be built.
Yeah. So if you want to build a third party, okay, you keep saying that, like, if people thought like you, nothing would happen, then start building. You can start with mutual aid program. You can start, I got it. I'm just going to keep talking. Okay. You can start with like mutual aid programs. You can start with like union.
Let's walk it back a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna beat you both quick. Talking over each other, nobody hears anything. Okay, so what I'm gonna have is Destiny finish what he was saying about the betting, and then I'm gonna have it bring it to Infrared to respond, and I'll count personally how long the response is, and I'll keep it under a minute and 30 seconds for both of you.
Okay, gotcha. I'm just trying to respond to what was said. So, like, if you want to build something, then start building something. Building something doesn't mean doing whatever gets you the most views on YouTube or Twitch, because shilling for third parties is like the most like extremist, popular, cool thing that you can do. That's literally all it is. There's no real building going on by advocating for an extreme position that you yourself, because you won't even put money on it, know is an absolute pipe dream fantasy. It's an incredibly privileged position to take from behind your computer screen because it sells well, it's cool, it's nice to make YouTube titles title that or whatever. But when it comes to real people that need real help, this type of shit doesn't help. You know, you mentioned soup kitchens and shit earlier. If you want to get real effective political change, find a local candidate to support. You can do national level fundraising or international fundraising in order to support local candidates at a city level or even at a state level, or work on like mutual aid programs, these different systems that can exist that can subsume and then replace these capitalist systems. You know, that you can replace things like food stamps or daycare or other things. You can build these programs out as well, or find a union that has a political slant and support them, build them up, raise money for that stuff. Like, all of these things are things that you can do if you want to affect real political change. Just hopping on to the most popular election that you can to get as many views as possible, and then just try to claim, oh, I'm doing things to make the world better. No, you're not. You just want to be on the presidential election, push your candidate, because that's what gets you the most views and the most money and the most donations.
Okay, well,
a minute.
I have a minute and 30 seconds. So,
Yep.
Look, Destiny, if people can't, like I said, you didn't actually address the two arguments. You didn't address the argument about national elections, because it's about information war plus organization, are what define politics up and down the ballot, okay? And if I'm going to advocate for a third party, which is what I'm doing, I'm not going to tell people to vote for the Democrats. I'm going to get people mad about the Democrats. I'm going to get people mad about the Republicans, and I'm going to broadcast as best of my ability using my platform to get people to go out and build a third party and focus, if they want to get involved in politics and do that work and they have free time to do it, focus your energy on building a third party to whom it may concern. So if I'm interested in building a third party, that's what I'm going to say. You're saying I'm only doing this for views, which is interesting. People like Hassan Piker dwarf me in views, and that's also a pun, I guess. But they dwarf me in views, and they don't advocate for a third party right now. So I don't know why you're saying that's like something that's that's something that's only doing it for clicks and for views. I'm taking a lot of risks taking the position that I am, and it has paid off. But that was based on risk, Destiny, not precedent. The other thing you said is that you guys know no one's going to vote for a third party. I don't think that's true. I think when you look at what Americans believe in terms of the issues, and you look at the platforms of the respective political parties, there is such a vast difference between those two things, then I think the situation is very right for a third party right now. And like I said, if people can't vote for their own interests, because you use the soup kitchen charity argument, oh, go vote and help people personally. If people can't vote in their own interests, because the poor people aren't the ones who are voting, those people who are saying are victims and need our help, they don't vote. If they can't vote in their own interests, why do we have a democracy?
Okay.
I mean,
I have democracy.
They have the ability to vote, but I mean, like, third parties clearly aren't doing.
What is democracy if you're just going to vote on?
I said a minute 50.
I mean, like, and again, like, you sound just like all the progressives. Like, what's the point of democracy if you won't support my people? Like, why aren't you guys like? You're so stupid. You don't realize that my people are the important.
Reason for voting is for other people, and those people aren't going to be getting out there and voting for themselves. Why the fuck do we need to get up to? An undemocratic technocracy in which Destiny does policies for people's best interests.
Bing Shilling, minute 50. Okay, so we're gonna throw it over to Destiny to respond.
Okay, so when you talk about how, first of all, your position, well, okay, so you vote in the ways that you do, ideally to make a better world for yourself, better world for other people. I guess it depends on why people vote. This idea that like you're voting for poor people that don't vote, I don't understand. You're fundamentally doing the same thing, except, and you're trying to say also, again, just like really far left progressives would say, it's like, oh, these people, they really support us, they just don't know it yet. Oh, they would support our policies, they just don't know it yet. I mean, like, if there's all these poor people out here that aren't voting, like, why haven't third parties made the argument to them to get them out to vote? It just doesn't happen. They don't go out and they don't vote for third parties because the third parties don't have any like local or state or federal power anywhere in the United States. So there's no point in doing it, right? And then also, when you talk about how like everything you've done is based on risk, not precedent, absolutely not. People come out with extreme points of view all the time. That was your entire branding, was being the most extreme motherfucker you possibly could be. Every single person in here knows it. Your entire branding is being abrasive and screaming. You're like a 2016 Destiny that supports a third party instead of one of the two primary ones. The idea that you can't focus energy on like building a third party on a local level also just doesn't make sense. If it's something that's so fucking important to you, that you think is so important, that you think matters so much, well, I mean, what are you doing to help build a third party? Is it literally just the stuff that also coincidentally empowers you to make more money on YouTube and Twitch? Is it the stuff that helps you build audiences and networks and connections, just like Hassan does on Twitch? Or have you actually, like, stuck your neck out and done things to support third party candidates? Like, are there any local or state level third party candidates you support, or do you not give a fuck about any of that? You just want to hop on and talk about presidential stuff because that's where all the viewership is.
Okay, you're wrong on that account. I have platformed local people running for local elections, like Steven Estrada for the Communist Party of Long Beach in California. So you're completely talking out of your fucking ass. And the idea that I've built my entire brand on being the most extreme person possible, this is such a recklessly stupid thing to say that even surprises me coming from you. My tone may be extreme, my style may be extreme, but in terms of the content of the views I've actually espoused, there's nothing extreme about them. I've reached out to conservatives, I've reached out to even to Trump people and right-wing people, and I've condemned far-left extremism. I've condemned extremism across the board. I've called myself, almost ironically, a communist centrist. There's nothing extreme about the actual content of my views. The content of my views is actually very tame and reasonable. Now, optics-wise, and the spectacle I put up is extreme, but that doesn't actually reflect the things I say. If you discount my views on history and maybe communism and the Soviet Union and maybe China, maybe that would be considered extreme in the United States. But in terms of what I advocate for here, there's nothing extreme about it. So yeah, there, like I said, and that's especially why there's no precedent for a guy like me, a self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist who doesn't pander to the extremists and ultra-leftists that say, oh yeah, all elections and politics are meaningless. We should just advocate for revolution now and direct action, whatever the fuck they say. Which is ironically sometimes something Hassan on the low-key flirts with, but he doesn't advocate for entirely. I really forgot the other shit you said before, so
how can you say you're not an extreme when you literally are talking about like eschewing both political parties and voting third party only, and you call yourself a self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist? You think in the United States those aren't extreme positions?
Do you think we live in an extreme time here in the United States? I think
everybody thinks they live in an extreme time.
Relative to the political climate, what I'm advocating for is very moderate.
You think that a Marxist-Leninist in the United States right now is a moderate position to be in? You think that advocating to only vote for third parties is a moderate thing to believe in?
As far as the majority of people are concerned, I don't think Marxist-Leninist positions have their attention or have any significance among them. But put my Marxism-Leninism aside. I'm advocating for a big tent third party that will reach out to people across the political aisle who merely agree upon the fact that the current political establishment is insular and gate-kept, that doesn't allow up-and-coming people with bright ideas, people like maybe initially before his political, change of tone, maybe people like Andrew Yang and all these people who have innovative political ideas, whatever you want. even libertarians, the Ron Paul people, whatever you want, we can all agree that regardless of where we stand politically and ideologically, if you're not part of the big club, which is the current establishment, who's in bed with special interests and who all know each other and who all attend their families' weddings and their families', events and social gatherings, if you don't know these people, you don't have a future in politics right now. So I think there needs to be a big tent People's Party, a third party that is about saving American democracy from these entrenched two parties which have gate-kept the ability for politics to actually give expression to what the American people actually want. And like I said, would you deny that there's a disconnect between the actual policy platforms that Americans mostly agree upon and the platforms of the respective parties? Because most Americans agree with each other when it comes to meat and potatoes issues.
So that's people say this all the time, that meat and potato issues, Americans.
Your gain on your mic, you probably should lower it a little bit. People are having
this is I don't know. This is not my mic, so I don't know how to work this mic.
Okay, we'll make do then. Destiny.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to hold you to one thing, I guess, because you were dancing away from every other point. Like, you are an extremist. I don't know how you could say that you're not an extremist. Like, when you advocate for a third party and you're trying to avoid the other two political parties, then by definition, like, I'm not saying extremist is bad, or maybe you want to avoid, like, the moral loading of the word, but, like, you must have some pretty extreme positions if, by your own admission, there are these huge nets that are cast by the Republican and the Democratic Party, and you're not caught by either one of those. I don't even think this is the most extreme time in U.S. history, and I would still say that you have, like, very extreme political views. Like, being a Marxist-Leninist is just a pretty extreme, unless you're going to say that, like, oh, there's tons of MLs in the United States, which I think every lefty would shoot themselves if you unironically believe that. Like, there's no way, everybody knows this. When you talk about how the Republicans and the Democrats are gatekeeping politics, I mean, like, inorganically, there's probably some extent to this going on in terms of, like, deciding who gets to be hosted at large debates and whatnot. Like, I'm sure we can say this happens, but also organically, this probably happens as well, because the Democratic and the Republican Party are so huge, because they include so many different beliefs, because they include so many different types of people, then by definition, it's going to be a little bit exclusionary, because if you want to run as a third party, like, chances are, depending on where you are, you could probably just run as a Republican or a Democrat and you'd be fine. Bernie Sanders is relatively extreme, but when he runs for president, he runs as a Democrat, The idea that also that, like, all Americans agree, like, you keep repeating this argument over and over again, and it sounds nice, but I'm sorry, but, like, people have ran with these arguments over and over again. Everybody agrees with me, they just don't know it. Americans agree with me, they just don't have ML ideas in their head. They just don't know it. Okay, well, then the onus is on you to get these views out in front of them and prove it, because right now, it kind of just sounds like a whole bunch of copium, where it's like, oh, trust me, they'd love my platform if they just knew about it. A lot of people know about these platforms, they just don't like them that much. And then finally, I don't think there is agreement broadly on, like, the quote-unquote meat and potatoes issues, because we've got these huge political divides, again, that you've said do exist in the United States. It's hard to say Americans agree on meat and potatoes issues when Republicans and Democrats are more polarized than they ever have been when it comes to how to address the problems in the United States. Meat and potatoes issues might be something like, the earned income tax credit or child tax credit, which are, like, heavily democratically supported things. Meat and potato issues might be things like who should get health care, which is something that is supported by the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party. Free education or easy access to education.
Time.
Yeah, so you're saying my position is extreme because I'm advocating for a third party. Well, like I said, you didn't address my argument. We live in an extreme political climate in which a third party is not something that's so extreme. But if you look at the election of Trump and all the shit that's gone down for the past, 4 years or more, I just don't see it as extreme. You say, oh, you're extreme because you're a Marxist-Leninist. Well, I just don't think the Americans are familiar with what Marxism-Leninism is, or how Marxism-Leninism might actually be something, or Marxist-Leninist leaders at least, might be people that they're interested in. I'm trying to make the case and show them that. I don't expect the majority of Americans to have sympathetic views toward Marxism-Leninism or to my specific ideology, and I don't blame them for it. I'm trying to make the case, and I think Marxist-Leninists need to prove that the dialectical materialism and Marxism is actually useful in being able to actually maneuver politically and win politically. So that's something I actually want to prove in practice. Now, I think the main thrust of your argument is basically that, see, I'm in a position where I'm able to experiment. You're saying, oh, it's copium that you're thinking that everyone agrees with you. Wait, I'm not necessarily saying everyone agrees with me. But what I am doing is I'm trying to establish an ability to experiment with what people really want and just be open to the fact that what people really want in this country is different from what's being represented to them in the form of the establishment. Whether this establishment is gate kept organically or inorganically is completely irrelevant. I don't care whether it's inorganic or organic. But it's actually funny that one of the examples for inorganic gatekeeping was something that had to actually be proven by WikiLeaks. And that's the only reason you fucking know about it in the first place. If it wasn't for WikiLeaks, we wouldn't have even have known about that. So who knows what else goes on behind the scenes?
Wait, what was proven by WikiLeaks exactly? Just
The collaboration between CNN and Hillary Clinton in the Democratic debates.
sure. So that was definitely bad, but I don't think that rises to the level of gatekeeping, right? Where somebody was passing off questions. It shouldn't have happened, but that gatekeeping, an argument it does not make. When you talk.
For people like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, it could. It was bad. It was horrible. She got caught. She got fucked, and she should have.
They're gatekeeping the party from outsiders,
If
perceived outsiders.
Sure, but Bernie also came up through the Democratic Party and ran in that primary, and in both of them, enjoyed a great deal of support within the Democratic Party, right? So to say that he's like an example of like gatekeeping, that's a pretty shitty job at gatekeeping if that's the case.
Well, the point is he rose so much from scratch without any institutional support within the Democrats, and even then they had to work against him. So I think that's actually a really good example of gatekeeping.
If arguably like one of the most successful politicians in the past like 5 years, just in terms of like national media coverage during a presidential election, is somebody that was gate kept. I mean, in that case, I don't care about gatekeeping because I guess it doesn't work very well if Bernie Sanders is able to do it off of small donations without enjoying any formal support.
The small donations were something that were not anticipated by the political elite within the Democrats or the Republicans. Even when it came to Trump, who didn't primarily rely on small donations, I know that, but none of them anticipated, hey, this is just about money. Anyone with enough money can basically rival what we're doing. And they never entertained the possibility because, like you, Destiny, back in 2016 or 2015, they're all sitting around and saying, nothing new under the sun. It's always been the same. Everything's been the same. There's no possibility Trump's going to win the Republican primary. He won it. So there's no possibility he's going to win the election. He won it. So there's no possibility that a guy like Bernie has a chance. He did have a good chance. You know what I'm saying? People like you have always been on the losing side of actual history.
Wait, none of this makes sense because all of the people that you're talking about exist within the realm of the main two political parties. You're using my argument. I don't understand why you think that like you can say like this is an example of anything that supports your end, especially if these are extreme times in U.S. history where there is an opportunity for a great realignment of the political parties.
That I was a Bernie supporter in 2016. So I wanted Bernie to win.
I'm not talking about you being a Bernie supporter. I'm just saying that like if there was going to be a great realignment of like political parties, or third parties going to rise up and do something, it seems like 2016 would have been a good chance.
Third parties are going to spontaneously rise and do something. I've always been consistent about the fact that this is something that requires will, not deference to some external objective reality. Second of all, I was a Bernie supporter back in 2016. All I've done is, in contrast to you, the so-called omni-liberals and the Hassan Chappell people, whoever the hell these people are, I am trying to seriously and honestly reflect upon the reasons for Bernie's failure. Now, it's not just the establishment. It's also an issue internally that I've also relentlessly critiqued and ruthlessly critiqued before. But it stands... as far as my views are concerned, and I haven't seen you address this in any substantive way, that the time is ripe for a third party.
If the time is ripe for the third party, then where are they? I can't, like, in a way, you almost have, like, an inarguable...
Wait,
now, the time is right now.
I said...
I'm going to point you...
I said... Destiny, continue.
Hey, Jesus, fuck. Okay, you keep saying that, like, the time...
Destiny,
I know, I'm just... See how long he goes on for. Oh, he really?
Go on.
Oh, he's still going. Okay. All I'm saying is that if the time is ripe for a third party, then where is it? I can't argue against this like nirvanistic, like, I don't want to say fallacy, but this nirvana that you're presenting, that's like, the time is right. It's gonna happen now. It's gonna happen now. It's gonna, like, I'm sorry, like, I don't know.
It's gonna happen. I'm saying it should happen.
Okay,
it may not.
Wait, Haas, I'll give him, I'm doing the 130. I swear to God, you will have equal time to talk. I just want to make sure people can hear what he's saying. Destiny?
Where are the third parties? Okay, like it's funny because I accused you of engaging in massive copium, and then you literally engaged in massive copium. Like Americans just don't know what ML is. Like if these poor people that didn't even know how to vote knew what dialectical materialism is, they would understand the material conditions they live in, and they could apply this philosophical lens to their society. Like I literally wrote down that you mentioned dialectical materialism. I literally wrote. I'm just gonna keep talking. I literally wrote quotes. I'm writing quotes of what you're saying. So, quote, I don't see it as extreme. Quote, Americans just don't know what ML is. Quote, dialectical materialism. Quote, it can maneuver and win politically. Then where is it? Marxist-Leninism has existed for 100 years. Where is it? Where is it in the United States?
Taking my words out of context. I said, here's what I said about dialectical materialism. I basically just said that it could be proven that political partisans who are equipped
back
with
up from the mic a little bit. I can't hear
prove-
anything you're saying. You got to back up from the mic.
He's going for that wide tone.
Can prove their ability as political leaders and organizers and lead by example, and therefore prove the merit of dialectical materialism in practice. I'm not talking about, disseminating esoteric theories and philosophies to people that they secretly care about dialectical materialism. I'm just saying the utility of dialectical materialism is something that can be proven in practice by means of savvy and conscientious political operatives who are using these theories to actually win people over and win victories. Now, has it happened yet? No, it hasn't, but that's why I'm here, because I believe it can happen. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But to say that I'm coping when I'm merely talking about something I think should happen and something that I'm committing to contribute as best as I can to happen is ridiculous. If I say, oh, I'm going to try and do something, that's copium.
Okay,
Why?
what is okay? So then here's a question: What's something that's being?
Okay, Haz, you have 20 seconds left. I want to give you time.
Why? Because I'm entertaining the possibility that it can happen. If I fail, I'll learn from my failure and adapt. That's what praxis means. But I'm not going to sit idly and have this guarantee in an establishment which has had decades to prove itself to the American people and has failed. So I'm going to keep failing and get better. And how is that cope? I don't understand.
So you keep saying people want something that's not being represented by the establishment. What is it in your mind that a third party can offer that's not being represented by the establishment?
Sure. I think when it comes to broad issues, like, for example, how exactly are we going to address this fourth industrial revolution and this rapid change in the nature of jobs and work and the way people...
Wait, is that literally not what the infrastructure bill aims to do?
The infrastructure can't even get passed.
Not yet, it hasn't been. But if the infrastructure bill that's being pushed by one of the two major political parties can't pass.
Wait.
You're not getting that bill.
Okay, if Fred, do you want to expand? It's still your time, so if you want to expand, you can.
Yeah. You're not gonna. That's the worst thing you could have said, Destiny. The infrastructure bill is precisely an example of why the things Americans need can't actually get done under the leadership of the two parties or the Democratic Party right now. I mean, it's the worst thing you could have said debate-wise. Wow, take the L. Anyway, what you said about
okay, so when you say how exactly are we going to address this fourth industrial revolution and rapid change of nature of jobs, right? So this word salad of yang shit, okay? So the infrastructure bill literally aims to try to address some of that. But if you're telling me that the infrastructure bill can't even pass with 50 Democrats in the Senate, how the fuck is a third party going to make a measurable difference here?
Because a third party is actually going to overcome the false divisions created by the Republicans and Democrats, and in my view, and I'm going to at least work to give it a shot, unify the American people on the basis of their, what I consider, common interests.
What are the false divisions? Wait, what are the false... Can we do point by point instead of the 30-minute fucking ramble?
Yeah.
What are the false divisions created by the Democrats and Republicans?
The divisions between the Republicans and Democrats don't actually reflect, in my view, authentic, objective in divisions as far as the real interests of the American people are concerned. Rather, they are niche cultural... propaganda, ideological differences that completely go beyond, materially speaking, what matters.
Okay, how are you to decide? So if there is somebody that's literally so my mom, for instance, is a single issue voter on things like abortion, how are you to decide for a voter, oh, that doesn't matter to you? You call it meaningless culture war, but like...
Abortion is the thing that brought her to be passionate about politics.
What?
Abortion is the thing that drew her into being passionate about politics.
Okay.
And running off of a mass movement, a mass popular movement, will draw a great deal of people disillusioned or otherwise uninterested by the current political system and political alternatives to be interested in politics. Trump got a lot of people to be interested in politics who otherwise wouldn't have been. Bernie also did.
Wait, hold on.
that.
You're not
So
answering.
the
You're rambling.
reason-
You're not answering my question.
the reasons why people are interested in politics differ, and this is the explanation for single issue voters, because that issue was this ideological and religious and narrative that sufficed to actually draw them to be interested in politics in the first place. The question is, if we live in a democracy, why are there single issue voters? Why isn't it enough to be interested in politics for the sake of fighting on behalf of what you consider your interests or the people's interests? Well, it's precisely because we have a very big deficiency within our so-called democracy, and I think a third party should run on the position of
Okay, so
saving
I'm just going to restate the
American
question. So, who are you to say that some of these social issues that people single issue vote on, how can you call that a false division when that is a real division and those issues are important to those people? Or do you think you have
Because
some
at the end
magical
of the
way of
day-
getting them to be interested
because
in more?
At the end of the day, the way in which it actually impacts their life is not all that significant.
So then you're retreating back to the argument earlier where like they just don't know what's good for them, but I'm going to show them so that they know what's good for them.
I definitely believe the American people right now do not necessarily know or have articulated the language of what their interests are.
Yeah,
I
but
don't-
you
I'm
but
not
you've
saying I
somehow
already
tapped
know.
into that.
But, and this is where you're creating a straw man, which is unsustainable as far as what I've actually said. I'm not claiming to know exactly what it is the American people want. All I'm committing to is a willingness to reach out and discover what that is. I'm just rejecting the idea that the only manifestation of the American people's interest is being reflected at the level of the two-party system.
Okay, so that's awesome. But right now, we're not talking about politics then. So politics is trying to politics is about securing political power. That's what it's about. If you're not claiming to know what people want, then you can't have a platform that represents them. If you just want to reach out and discover what people want, then you're not engaged in politics. Hold on, you're not engaged in politics at that point. You're doing like polling data or you're...
Okay. Pause for a moment. I just want to say to both of you, if we're both talking at the same time, nobody hears shit.
Yeah, I know, but if I stop, he just keeps going. This guy's talking like twice as much as me. Yeah, sorry.
This is what the thing. Okay, so
anyway,
okay, I did it. Okay, my major rule, my one rule is when I'm talking, nobody else is talking. Okay, I'm not gonna move on that. So, since the problem is when you do the point by point, people are interrupting more, and when it comes to the other thing, when I do 5-minute diatribes, people don't want 5-minute diatribes. So I'm gonna do my best to control this, but I'm just gonna have Destiny go. I'm gonna try to shorten it to 30 seconds to 1 minute instead, so it could be more. So Destiny, then Haas, and we'll do 30 seconds to 1 minute, so it could be more point by point.
I want to go point by point, but the problem is if I try to go point by point, when I go 1 point, he goes like another 2-minute point. So it's just like it's so much like talking, and then I either have to scream over him.
You're wasting time, dude. I got places to be.
Obviously, you don't if you agreed to do this. You have no obligation to be here. So when you said that you're not claiming to know what people want, if that's the case, then you're not doing politics. Politics is all about like representing constituents. We live in a democracy. Unless you want to be some authoritarian dictator, by definition, if you're doing political action, you're doing action on behalf of other people to secure some type of political power. For you to try to skirt all of that and to avoid any like responsibility or strong claims or put a stake in the ground saying this is what I believe in and this is what I think people want, and to just say I'm just trying to reach out and discover, go be a pollster.
Yeah, it's a philosophically and politically, ideologically untenable view or whatever, because politics is about building power, but one of the aspects of real politics is a genuine openness as to what being able to listen to the people. I mean, if you want to talk about I'm a Marxist-Leninist, to me, I learned this from Maoism. It's something called the mass line. You don't necessarily begin with the assumption you know what the people want. You just have a willingness to build an institution, to build an apparatus, to build some kind of organization from which you are going to enter into a certain dialectic or dialogue or interaction, if you want to use a less loaded term, with the masses of people. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you already know what they want. You will discover what they want by actually drawing a base of contact with them and drawing support from them and reaching out to them. And media is probably the most important part of that. Media was the foundation of, for example, the Russian Bolshevik Party. Medium was the foundation probably of every alternative revolutionary or
that was a minute
third party in the history of the world.
I mean, like, I've done conversations like this before. So it's so strange. As much as you hate Vosh, you talk so much like him. You say so much and so little at the same time. So like boiling down everything that you said before about how when you engage in your political practice, you will discover what the people want is a direct contradiction to what you said earlier when you said, and I quote, people want something different that's not being represented by the establishment. How do you know people truly want something that's not being represented by the establishment if you don't even know what they want yet? And part of your political journey is going to be discovering what they want. It's not, hold on, what I just said was not.
Wait. I just said the 1 minute back and forth, Destiny.
Yeah, what I said is not illogical. I'm just literally following and I'm writing in quotes like your very own statements. I guess if you want to address that contradiction, then go. How can you know that people want something different that's not being represented by the establishment, but then go on and admit, I don't know what people want. I'm going to discover that as I do like my political experiment. Like, again, you haven't even described to me like what's missing. What is it that you're going to offer people that they don't already have or that they need?
It's very simple logic. You can know what people don't want without knowing exactly what they want positively. For example, if someone doesn't want to eat shit, you don't know what their favorite food is. They just don't want to eat the shit. You just said something completely stupid and illogical.
If people don't want to eat the shit, then why did a record number of people vote for it in the last election?
Because there was a steaming pile of diarrhea in their view. That was the alternative to that shit.
Yeah, but they could have just not voted. You have some of the most engaged voters in the history of presidential voting. How are you going to tell me that they're not interested?
On Trump. Now you're here.
It's all cope. The
government doesn't even fucking work.
The government works exactly as it's supposed to.
There was a referendum on Trump. You voted out Trump. Here you are. The government. You know what government's about, right? It's not about to own the other side. It's actually about to get things done. Our government can't get things done. We can't even pass a basic fucking infrastructure bill. You won that. There was a record number turnout. I was advocating for people to not vote, to boycott the vote. Well, you got Biden in power. Here our government is, and it doesn't even fucking work. What have you won, Destiny?
The government is not about getting things done. That's not what the government's job is. The government's job is to represent the will of the people. So if you have
how is the will of the people being represented?
Because this country is historically divided and polarized in ways that it probably never has been before, at least in terms of polarization goes.
Represented.
What?
How is the will of the people being represented right now?
The will of the people is being represented right now because half of Americans don't agree with the other half on what should happen. So the government is having a really hard time getting anything done. But that's what you would expect from a government that is representing the democratic interests of the people. This country is legitimately divided. Biden got more votes than any president in U.S. history, and Trump was number 2. So obviously, there's going to be a difficult time if the government's power is logically extending from its constituents. If the constituents disagree, then there's going to be a really hard time for the government to get anything done, of course.
Only site at which the will of the people can ever find representation is in the current established options they have on the shelves. There's not a possibility for a different product in your view. It's only what's on the shelf.
There could be a possibility, but the onus is on you to present that, and all you've told me is you're going to try to discover it in your future streams.
You can claim this with absolute certainty somehow.
Never said that. It is possible that in the future, there might be conditions that arise that make a third party likely to rise. But the problem is the two political parties that exist right now are incredibly entrenched, both in our media, in our finances, and in our government, and in everybody's minds, that it seems really difficult for a third party to rise up and conquer. And you haven't given me a good argument for why a third party even should. You haven't even given me like positions, like when I asked you, like, what can a third party offer that the primary two can't? Your response was like, how are we going to address the fourth industrial revolution and rabbit? You sound like you're giving me a Yang answer. You're not telling me anything. That's not a policy position. That's not like legislation. This is just like some vague shit that you could talk about on Twitter that has no real teeth behind it.
Destiny, there are plenty of bright policymakers who want to be given a platform in this third party. I confess, I am not a policymaker. Obviously, broad narratives are what's going to define entirely new parties. Yeah, when I'm saying something as vague as the fourth industrial revolution, I am talking about a very broad issue that has to be addressed in an equally broad way, and politically speaking. Now, if it was just a matter of one or two policies, it's not a matter of one or two policies. It's not a matter of 3 policies or 4 policies. It's a matter of a whole multiplicity of policies, which are only unified by these broad narratives or whatever, these broad so-called word salads that you're giving. If it was just the sum total of opposing policy prescriptions, obviously we wouldn't be talking about anything. But it stands right now that we can see that there actually is a certain reason why some policies are able to make it and others don't. Policies which don't threaten the special interests have a chance. Policies which threaten the current special interests don't have a chance. So it's almost as simple as that. The two parties are bought out by special interests.
I mean, well, that's a whole other conversation if you want to have that. But so, like, when you say like a whole multiplicity of policies that are painted by this broad narrative are what you're talking about, how do you then connect with earlier? You were saying poor people are like about like meat and potatoes issues. Are you going to have this multiplicity of political discussion with them? And you're going to bring this like broad thing of new policies? Like every poor person is going to hear this and think you're just some random politician that's full of shit that's offering it.
Broad narratives are what give expression to people's belief that they can actually address their meat and potatoes concerns politically.
What's a unique broad narrative that isn't encompassed by one of the two political parties?
No.
What? No. What is it? What is a unique broad narrative that's not currently encompassed?
What is unique broad narrative? Sure. One of them is the current political system is rigged and it serves the interests of special interests and not the people. If we want to even have the ability to give political representation to the will of the people, we need a third party that's not already captured by these entrenched, established interests and these special interests.
Yeah, so literally, like both political parties say this all the time. The current political system is rigged. Like the Republican Party right now believes the election was stolen. Trump constantly said about how the current political system is rigged. Bernie Sanders was a huge candidate. He said that parts of the political system are rigged. The Justice Democrats talk about all the time about how the political system is rigged. Even Nancy Pelosi talks about how corporate interest is rigged. Like, so that's not a unique broad narrative.
What about the two-party system? Is that something they talk about?
No. So you're telling me that your broad narrative that establishes your third party is there should be third parties.
Yeah.
I can't beat that one. That was the unassailable argument that I was waiting for, I guess. Okay.
Hold on, Destiny. Let me ask you a question. What is democracy?
That's a really broad question. Ideally, you have a group.
Content of democracy.
What is what?
Just quickly. What's the content of democracy?
Ideally, it's some group of people whose will is being represented in some way.
Okay, so what does that look like concretely?
Democracy on its own doesn't look like anything. I mean, we could talk about like a representative democracy. We could talk about like the democracy of the United States. You could talk about you could talk about voting in a classroom. I don't like.
If my position is that a third party is the only manner by which American democracy can be restored or built or revived, however you want to phrase it, then obviously the burden is not upon me to say like, oh, this is specifically the issue that they have to focus upon. But there are many bright ideas. There are many ideas that people have. I personally think that we should be looking at the early 20th century and late 19th century issue of land reform, which was actually what formed the foundation, inadvertently at least, of the New Deal Democrats. Although they didn't pursue direct land reform themselves, it actually had influence on the housing reforms and the housing legislation that eventually would get passed, especially, if I recall correctly, in the post-war.
Yeah, I don't care what policies Americans supported 100 years ago. I'm sorry. I don't think that's politically relevant right now.
No, I actually think it is relevant because I am also a political theorist and a theorist. So I don't know. We don't have to get into.
How is this meat and potatoes issues? Which Americans do you think know anything about this?
But land reform is probably the most decisive issue or policy that actually leads to political change historically.
Okay, how do you know that most people care about this then? Where do you find that support at?
Because if you theorize politically, the basic social contract between a given state and its people lies in a state being able to give its people some kind of economic, and I don't mean this in like the loaded leftist sense, some kind of means of production, just in the sense of like a solid economic basis with which they can actually engage in economic activity. So governments, if you look at almost any state in history, founds its basis upon this type of land grants or giving titles of nobility and feudalism, or during the time of the French Revolution, especially with Napoleon. I don't want to get too in the nitty gritty of this, but yeah, land reform is a linchpin of political change, and it's the foundation of states. Whether it's directly phrased as land reform or not, like the stability of the American state in the post-war era was sustained by, for example, those post-New Deal housing policies and things like that, which gave Americans like the minimum of a stable economic livelihood.
Can you give me an example of what do you mean by land reform? What kind of land reform are we talking about?
Well, today that could obviously either be actual land reform of giving people actual, like, just straight land and space. It could be something focused on housing, like what they're doing in China. They're giving grants of people to own single home.
So when you say
apartments.
giving people land, you mean we're going to do plots in Montana? We're going to start giving that to people that live in California and hope they move out there? Or what do you mean by giving people land? What happens to apartment complexes? Like what?
People some kind of means of having like a minimal economic. It could even be UBI. It could be a lot of things.
So UBI is land reform.
It has to function as the equivalent to what land reforms have historically functioned as.
Do you see how like...
Wait, 1 second. We have 30 minutes left before this is over. And so if there's any points you want to get...
forgiveness is an important thing too.
Haas,
Yeah.
do you have a hearing problem?
Go ahead, Dylan.
Okay, thank you. So for the next 30 minutes, if you have any points you want to get in, now would be the time to get them in. I'm just telling you this now, so afterwards you're not like, fuck, I wanted to say this. So if there's anything in the back of your pocket that you have yet to bring up and you want to bring up, now would be the time. Okay, so you guys can continue.
I just want to say bye to Steven.
Yeah.
Hi, Steven.
Hi, what's up?
I'm just chilling. You like my outfit? I'm a vampire.
Nice, looks awesome.
Thanks.
Is she a third-party vampire or a Democrat vampire?
I'm Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so whatever. He's British, so he doesn't participate in American politics.
Ah, Boris Johnson vampire. Okay.
That's nice. They're kind of like matching costumes because Haas is a fucking time vampire over here, right? I'm sorry.
You can continue. You got 30 minutes left.
Yeah, so like I don't know, like this is every third party like debate ever. Like every time it's like our thing is going to come and it's the third party that represents the interests of the people that aren't being represented, but I don't really know what those interests are. And it's like, okay, well, like what, like, I'm not asking for specific policies, but just like broadly speaking, like what the fuck are we even, well, what about like land reform from the 19th century? And it's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, well, like UBI, like, well, what the fuck does that mean? Right? Like you're basically at the end of the day, like, and this is the problem with third parties. The problem is that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are incredibly broad. They encompass a lot of different political ideology. When you can go all the way left and find somebody like AOC or Bernie Sanders, and then all the way right and find somebody like Manchin or Sinema in the same political party, it's going to be really difficult for a third party to find space in there. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. There might be a third party that makes the case. We come up and like, hey, you know what? Here's some issues that people really care about, and nobody's talking about them, and we're going to hammer these issues, and we're going to start to gain political power doing it. But you haven't presented me any of those issues. Talking about stuff that happened in the 1900s, or trying to talk about stuff that is happening in China, like that's a good thing to sell to the American people. Like these are just not issues that are going to win with like the meat and potatoes poor people that you think aren't voting because they don't have a third party to represent them.
Yeah, I think this whole debate really boils down to Destiny's inability to look beyond the appearance of things and actually think about what is the real essence behind these things. Like, why is it that Americans vote in the way they do? Why is it, for example, he just mentioned this, Americans have a negative view of China? Is that because they necessarily do, or is it because of a deeper and more fundamental reason? But regardless of the fact, I think it can be summed up simply and neatly as this. We are supposed to have a government by, for, and of the people. This is the standard to which we are supposed to hold the current American government, as well as the current so-called representatives of the American people. My only claim is that they don't satisfy the criterion of a government by, for, and of the people, which works on behalf of the interests of the people, rather than special interests and entrenched interests and insular establishments, which claim to represent the objective facts and the truth and the will of the people, but in actual fact and in actual reality utterly failed to do that, just going off of the inability to get out widespread voter turnout, with the exception of these single, issue referendums like the referendum on Trump. But even then, turnout wasn't really that impressive as far as a democracy is concerned. Maybe relative to America, it's impressive, but if for a so-called democracy, it's really not that impressive.
I mean, the problem is you haven't demonstrated, like, by, for, and of the people. None of these things describe third parties right now. You don't have any third parties by the people. They're all incredibly small. They have no power. You don't have any third parties for the people. They all have niche issues that not many people care about, and you don't have any third parties of the people because they don't have any government offices.
You got to talk. I want to give time to respond.
Destiny, the difference between me and you is that you have the burden of defending the people who now do claim to represent the will of the people. All I'm saying is I want to fight for an alternative. I want people to look at things like movement, or now I think it's no longer movement, it's the People's Party right now. Look at big tent, broad coalition parties that are trying to build third parties in this country, and and fight and build, and don't be afraid to risk building those alternatives.
Is there a
Now, the
single
reason-
third party like that in the United States that you'd be comfortable putting money on getting a single federal seat or 2 federal seats?
No, because it's not a matter of a gamble. This is actually a point in politics.
This is all a gamble. You admitted earlier that aren't you gambling for the future?
This is the single argument you have consistently been unable to respond to. I doubt you're going to be able to
Sure. Well,
respond
I'm sorry.
to
Give it to me again. I'll write it down. I'm writing it down. Go ahead.
You are treating this reality as a matter of just this pure external objective thing outside of our will. I am saying there is a moment in politics in which actual will becomes decisive. I am not saying that on its own there's this party that's going to make it. We have to fight to make it that way, because this is a moment that demands our actual will, our actual intervention. Why would I even be here? Why would I even be live? Why would I even be talking about this if I didn't think people actually have to do something and actually have the will to fight for this? If I thought it was just going to happen on its own, I wouldn't even be streaming right now, Destiny.
Can you summarize that?
Yeah, I'm not saying something's just going to happen on its own spontaneously. I am actually using my platform to fight for this alternative, to convince people, specifically politically conscientious and educated people with spare time to care about politics, to do this, right?
Okay,
They
and then
haven't
can
done
you
it yet.
say I'm not responding to something? Can you state this in the form of an argument? What is the argument here?
Can you demonstrate I didn't make an argument if you want to do that game?
I'm not trying to play a game. So this is what you said. You're treating this reality as a matter of pure external objective thing outside of our will. There is a moment in politics in which actual will becomes decisive on its own that this party will make it. We have to fight.
Okay. I gotta hear. Okay, can we stop for a second? I didn't hear what the question was. So, Dusty, can you restate the question so we can have Pause respond to the question?
I don't know what the argument is that I'm supposed to respond to. That there's going to be some magical shonen-esque Naruto figure that's going to come up that we're all going to put our will behind. Like, you can't, like, it sounds like a 14, it sounds like the Occupy Wall Street kids, honestly. Like, and I admire, I'm sorry that I interrupted your question with my answer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's
My
not
bad, yep,
clicking for
keep
you.
going.
It's not clicking for
my
you.
bad,
You
I'm
just
so
said
sorry,
again.
yep. I just repeated you word for word. That's what I said. I'm so sorry.
Said, Destiny, you're really angry. You need to chill.
I'm losing
You
it
just
right
said,
now.
Destiny, it's okay. It's just the internet. Destiny,
Okay.
you just said a Naruto guy is going to appear out of nowhere. You just made the argument again, the straw man that I'm saying something is just going to happen out there. You literally ignore and dodge the argument. What I'm literally saying is no, I'm not saying something is just magically going to happen. I'm advocating people to do things.
So this was the second part of what I was
Actually
getting
make
to,
it
right? So if you are on the end of this saying, no, I'm advocating for this, I want to intervene, I want to have some sort of intervention, I'm going to fight to make this, what are you fighting for? And when your answer to what are you fighting for is, well, I'm going to ask people and find out. Like, you're putting a cart before the horse. You're already declaring that you're going to have some huge fight for a third party, and you don't even know what you're offering yet. You don't even know, other than these like empty platitudes of like the fourth industrial revolution and the dialectical materialistic way of analyzing the land reforms of the 1900s. Like, nobody cares about this shit. No American, especially no meat and potatoes, poor voting American, gives a fuck about any of this shit. Nobody's any of the fuck you're talking about. I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. And my job is to do this shit all day on fucking YouTube and Twitch. So like, if you're telling me, if you're, I gotta finish responding. I have to finish responding.
That's what I'm trying to. I just want
Okay,
Can you
Jesus,
please finish
yeah.
responding? Move it
Like,
around.
if you were to come here and you were like, you know what? I think that there are these 3 or 4 things. None of these political parties are talking about this shit. We need to do something. Instead, you literally admitted earlier the biggest point for why your third party is arguing something that nobody else is arguing. That biggest point was that they were arguing in favor of a third party. That's it. That was the most unique thing about a third party, is that they want a third party to exist. When you're actually willing to admit that foundational epistemic circularity for your entire justification for existing, it's like, well, what the fuck is even the point of what you're doing, right? That's like saying like, hey, you've got 2 teams in basketball. We should have a third team. Why? Because nobody else is advocating for a third team. Well, what's that third team going to do? Advocate for itself to exist. Okay, what the fuck is the point?
Yeah, let me be very clear. So, Destiny, it's not the job of ordinary people to care about all this complex stuff I am, but for someone who like goes on stream and acts like they're like this extremely politically informed person and this like smart guy, think it is actually your job to sit the fuck down and actually try to think this through a little bit. You can't feign ignorance and pretend to be some dipshit fucking League of Legends gamer, which you are, admittedly, but you're pretending to be the contrary.
Try not to get
So
too
you
mad,
have to
okay?
bear with me and not, just because you don't know these theories and you're just an ignorant person, it's not really an excuse. Now, second of all, Destiny, my position has been very clear. You're saying, all you're advocating is for a third party. Yeah, but for why? Because policies can't even be passed which go against the interests
And the
of
third
special-
party can't pass them.
Yeah, but I think a third
Then
party
what's the
can-
point?
Destiny,
Let him finish.
Dylan, can you shut this guy up? Am I talking or no?
I just told him to let you.
Yeah,
finish.
Destiny.
so
Destiny.
sorry.
My whole position is a third party can actually give representation, enter into contact with the American people, put forward policies and proposals that are going to work for the interests of the American people, and there's not going to be special interest or captured, entrenched, established interests which are going to stop them or prevent them, okay? Now, as far as what exactly that's going to look like, what you're demanding of me is an absurdity. You're basically saying I should single-handedly draft every single detailed policy proposal
Never said that.
of this third party.
That's a straw man
Without
fallacy.
Let him finish, Destiny.
He's straw man.
Yeah,
Destiny.
he's extremely immature. It's okay. He's used to League of Legends. But anyway, Destiny, you're basically trying to say that I need to personally, draft these points. But you're saying, it's so stupid that you're just saying there should just be a third party. But that's just because we know the current two parties can't give expression to what the American people want, not on the basis of the merit of these ideas and the policies, but because of these external overgrowths on our American democracy. When I'm saying I want a third party, all I'm effectively advocating for is American democracy. I'm advocating for democracy. Now, I don't claim to know what exactly the result of that democracy is going to be, but I think a third party is the minimal standard by which such a democracy can be possible. Right now, I don't think we're living in a democracy. I think we're living in a political system that is captured by special interests and an establishment which doesn't represent the interests of the American people. So it's as simple as that.
I hope in the future, if we ever do a debate, I really want to go like line by line. I don't have anything I really say against you. It's like the Vosh strat. Not even actually. Vosh is better at this. You're saying so much that is really just devoid of content. Like this idea of like I'm advocating for democracy. Yeah, guess who else says that? Republicans and Democrats, right? This doesn't mean anything. When you talk about like, I don't want a third party, just have a third party. Earlier, you literally admitted the whole thing, the most unique thing you were advocating for in a third party was the existence of a third party. You literally said it earlier. It was a huge point of contention in the conversation. If you want to actually advocate for things and you want to actually win people over, okay, and you want to have this broad tent, then you need to find issues because this is where these political moments start. These political moments don't start with some like random person saying, I'm going to make a third party. They usually start with some problem that neither, not even neither, that no entity is addressing at that point in time. This is where people on the ground, these are these moments of action where people gain a great deal of political power, is when these moments come up and there is nobody offering a solution to any of these problems. For you to sit here and say, you're demanding that I fix everything and that I give the perfect utopia, I'm not saying that at all. I just want like a couple broad strokes that don't involve something from the fucking 19th century or don't involve you using the terms dialectical materialism and meat and potatoes issues in the same fucking paragraph explanation. It doesn't make any sense. If you want to advocate for a third party, you should be able to have some like broad issue, some broad narrative, something you're pushing that people want, and you need to be able to defend it. If that's too much for you, then you're basically asking me to attack a utopian third party that doesn't exist, that might exist at some point in the future, that you're asking people to suffer real material harm for right now to try to bring it into existence.
So, 1, 2. The first thing you're saying, you think it's somehow a contradiction between talking about dialectical materialism and meat and potatoes issues, when the whole point of dialectical materialism is to be able to discover what meat and potatoes issues are. Now, that it takes a great amount of intelligence to discover simple things is like, it's basically like, it's like almost an axiom of computers. Like, that's how fucking computers work. You use a lot to get a little. It takes a lot of complexity to discover simple things. I don't know like why you're acting like it's such a huge contradiction. But regardless of that, to actually address what you said, like I said, you're saying that everyone talks about American democracy across the aisle. Well, all you're doing here is meta-narrativizing the whole debate and like complaining about not being able to go point by point. Why don't you actually talk about the content of what they mean by American democracy. When I say we don't have current American democracy, I mean, regardless of what the American people want, even if I ideologically disagree with it, it can't get passed because there is an institutional and establishment impediment, the special interest and so on and so on. Now, if they mean, oh, we're just fighting for democracy, like, what do they mean by that? Because clearly I mean something radically different. Now, you're saying, oh, what is it you're risking for Americans to suffer so much material harm for? I think it's very clear that, again, you haven't addressed the argument about the issue of scale. Right now, if the Republicans win, more people may be harmed, and that's the argument you may make. But when you introduce the factor of time and scale, like generations from now, or even 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, your argument collapses. What if, by not doing something now, it should be wrapping up soon.
50 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What if by not doing something now, you're risking so much for the future? You know, you're meta-narrativizing, saying, oh, this is just like Bosch, and this is just like this.
I'm giving you extra time. I gotta make sure.
Dylan, stop cutting him off.
You can really just focus on the actual content of the argument. You say, oh, you haven't
There is
said
no
what-
content to your argument. You're uttering so much crazy random shit. There's like nothing for me to even respond to.
If listen, you can say there's no content to my argument, in which case I'll say you just basically conceded to me.
Okay,
because-
so here's a question then.
You're just
Let's
refusing
ground
to
this out.
engage
Let's
in any
ground this out
process.
a little bit, okay? Do you want people today to risk suffering real material harm for a third-party gamble in the future?
the people who don't vote on behalf of averting.
No,
their
the people
own
that do
material harm.
vote, do you want them to divert their vote to a third party and risk?
On whose behalf are they voting?
I'm asking you. I don't know why you're trying to answer my question with a question. I'm asking you.
You're making it seem like I'm telling like a homeless guy, oh no,
I
don't
never
vote for
said
the
that.
Democrat.
You're talking about
Make
straw
it
manning,
better.
okay? All I'm
Those
asking.
people who are suffering, don't vote.
I can't.
The
hear
people
it.
you're talking about who are going to be
Hello?
harmed, don't
One,
vote.
two, Destiny.
All I'm at, let's try this again, okay? This might be our next 15 minutes. I don't know if you'll ever answer this. So my question is do you want people to suffer real material harm for a third-party gamble in the future? So telling somebody who would vote one party to divert to a third party and potentially suffer real material harm for a gamble of a third party in the future.
People are going to suffer regardless. That's what I was saying.
Okay, so you're not going to, so you...
I reject the framing of your question. People are going to suffer either way.
So do you think that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are making the same offers, the exact same material offers to the American public?
in the long term, it doesn't matter?
I'm not, why do you keep, do you see how you're dodgy as fuck on all of my questions?
I reject the framing of your question. You're making it seem like right now is the only
Because when you go to vote, right now, that moment of voting is a moment that exists in history. It will come and it will pass. It is an exact moment.
Not a moment later, but like almost a year later, we still don't have an infrastructure bill. So it's not in the moment.
The voting is in the moment, right? We didn't get...
even pass the
Alright,
bill.
so we don't
that's
have-
going to affect these.
Okay, so here's a
people's
question. If the bill passes, what are you going to change? If the bill
lives.
passes, are you going to completely change your position on all of this? Holy shit, we got an infrastructure bill?
No, I'm not, because they can't even pass the trimmed down, shitty, subpar so-called infrastructure bill that we have now. God knows the one they're going to be able to pass, and by that time, it's not even it doesn't even effectively carry out what it originally intended to.
If the bill was like $1.5 trillion, you think that's worthless to the American public?
In the long term, there's nothing impressive.
You don't have.
about
Do you
the-
see like the talk around? All right,
Yeah,
I'm good.
there's
I don't
not-
have anything
yeah,
else
okay,
to say.
so Destiny, so you wanna use the same standards for both of us? If I ask you a yes or no question, you can only do yes or no.
No,
You
not a
can't
yes or
reject
no, but just at least engage with the question. Not like it doesn't even matter. The future is long. Like it doesn't matter. I refuse to reject it. You can try asking me a question. I'll answer. Go ahead.
Hold on. The infrastructural bill, there's absolutely nothing impressive about a government passing a 1.5, and it's not going to be 1.5 trillion, a 1.5 trillion dollar infrastructure bill, given the absolutely sorry state of American infrastructure in regards to like the passing of time. If you look at China's infrastructure, even the infrastructure in certain European countries, American infrastructure is absolutely laughable. So this idea that like this watered down bill is going to be somehow impressive or a hallmark of why someone had to go out and vote for Biden is just an extreme cope. And also, I don't see why Trump wouldn't have also maybe conjured up some kind of infrastructure bill to pass. Maybe he would have had his own. Who knows? I mean, I don't even see what your argument is.
I like how you asked.
You both have been very good when it comes to moderating yourself, so I gotta go use the bathroom. And since you've both been so well behaved, I think you can deal with that. Destiny, it's your turn.
Okay, you said you were gonna ask me a yes or no question, and you just fucking rambled again.
You said you agreed with me that you don't have to answer yes or no questions.
I literally told you, yeah, you can ask me a question, I'll answer it, and you took the opportunity to ramble.
No, I thought what you said is, oh, you don't have to ask me a yes or no question, but at least address the substance of my argument. Isn't that ad verbatim what you just said?
Oh yeah, but you made it sound like you were about to ask me a question, but I guess you weren't.
No,
you just
shut the
were
fuck
rambling
up,
on. You're just rambling on the same shit. So
I
then,
literally quoted you ad verbatim saying.
okay,
you
so
don't
then-
have
so
to
then
answer
earlier
that,
then-
yes or no question.
earlier you believe that who is this guy that just joined?
I'm a mod. I'm gonna just make sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's maybe wipe a towel off your forehead. You seem really sweaty and nervous.
I'm good, my dude. Thanks though.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I can't argue against like the Nirvana third party where you've given me no positions, you've given me no reason to think it's going to succeed. You're telling people to suffer real material harms right now, or risk real material harms right now, to vote for a hypothetical third party in the future, and then furthermore, you're going to make the argument that the Democrats and the Republicans are materially offering the same thing to the American public right now. If Trump would have passed an infrastructure bill like this, why wouldn't he have pushed for that more rather than the tax reform that just benefited the wealthiest Americans? He got one major bill through, and that was it.
That's like saying, why didn't Obama push for an infrastructure bill? Because as the passage of time changes, the policy prerogatives change.
Obama's the worst example you could use because he pushed for the ACA. That was his big legislative accomplishment.
Push for an infrastructure bill.
Because he could only do one thing, right? So what did they?
Trump did talk about the sorry state of American infrastructure.
Yeah, but what did he do? What was his legislative priority? What did he pass? It was the massive tax cuts. But you have one
after 2020.
You have one thing. Also, technically,
I don't know. Maybe he would have. Maybe he.
I don't know. Who knows? Okay.
You don't know for certain whether Trump would have.
That's
or would
rich
have
of you to use the argument you don't know for certain when you're advocating people to switch their vote from two confirmed parties to a hypothetical third party in the future for something that might be good generations down the line.
I'm actually not really just saying people should vote for the third party. I'm saying people should focus. People who have the time to care about politics actively, like your listeners and even you yourself, right? You sit on your ass all day and talk about fucking politics.
I don't sit on my ass all day. I get involved politically.
Okay, regardless, you don't represent the majority of people. Your life is mostly focused around.
The issues that I advocate for are literally democratic issues who currently own like both sides of the government right now. How can you say that my issues are not the ones that the most American people care about?
Because you're not like someone who's focused on, like, the way you make a living is about politics, okay? So if your life can be dedicated to politics, all I'm saying is focus your energies and your dedication on building a third party.
No, why the fuck would I focus on a third party when I don't know any third parties that are talking about the issues that I think most Americans care about? You should certainly haven't provided that third party.
There are enough like-minded people who agree that they can't get what they seek to get done through the current two parties. And
like what? You didn't give me an example of any of those issues.
Of what issues?
What are things that you... Fuck, I have to scroll like 10 minutes. Okay, like, I asked you literally, like, what is something...
There's a few.
Yeah, go for it.
There's debt forgiveness. That's probably the biggest one that I think can unite people across the aisle. It's the issue of big tech monopolies and big tech censorship, which is, I guess a cultural issue.
You think people are united on issues like debt forgiveness and big tech monopolies and censorship?
I think debt forgiveness can unite this country, definitely.
Okay. I think that there are massive... When you say debt forgiveness, do you mean all debt, or do you mean like just student loan debt, or...
Well, there is a massive issue of just American people being in debt right now. And financial reform, things of that nature, housing reform, that there's... we have a housing crisis in this country, right? And I don't see how the Democrats or the Republicans can address that crisis in meaningful ways.
Yeah, because the crisis is very complicated to address.
Oh yeah, it's very complicated because everything is just an objective reality. Except
why do you keep saying objective reality? Like you're some philosophy debate, bro.
Everything can be explained by me deferring to other causes, except when I sit on and tell people they have to go vote for
If you want to push me on a single cause, I can explain to you the complexities of any particular cause. So, for instance, we can talk about housing being a complex issue. Housing is complicated primarily because the people that live in a certain district district are already going to be ultra privileged being in houses. So in order to uproot them, you necessarily have to act in an undemocratic fashion to do it, which is something that's very difficult to do in the United States. That's why when you take votes in areas about like, hey, like, should we expand like multifamily housing or should we open like a fuck ton of apartment buildings? Well, who are the people that are most likely to vote in that area? It's not going to be the transient millennials that come in and out of work jobs. It's going to be people that own houses, that live in that area, that have roots in that area. And when you're talking about voting for expanding housing in those areas, guess who that hurts the most? It hurts the most entrenched voters that are the most likely to show up to the polls, that are the most likely to go to their city council meetings, that are the most likely to stay there for long periods of time. That's what makes that issue like complicated, okay? Just because, hold on. Just because you've come to this conversation with, just because you've come to this conversation with zero understanding of any of the policies you're talking about, please don't project that on me. This conversation could have been entirely interesting in like 50 different ways. Just because you're utterly clueless on everything except for these weird fucking phrases that have to do with fucking dialectic materialism or whatever philosophy you're going to talk about, doesn't mean that I came here clueless to argue about the specific policies that I talk about or advocate for. So I'm not hand-waving shit like you are with your utopian third party. I'm on the ground talking about real issues that are very complicated and affect a lot of people.
We're not on 8 Mile. We're on Twitch. Okay.
I have to talk fast because you, again, talk like 3 times as much to me in this conversation, but there you go.
If you're interested in dialectical materialism, DM me and I'll set up, I can educate you and you can be my student. So I don't know why you keep bringing it up. You seem interested in the ideas of dialectical materialism. Yeah, one sec. And it should be like 5 minutes. And and you said, okay, I agree that the housing crisis, obviously it's complex, but can the way we address, like, is the inability for us to address it because of that complexity is what I reject?
Yes, it is. That is the issue. Oh, how would you address it with a third party then? Tell me how you would go about doing it then. I'll wait.
Yeah, a third party can have a general housing reform whose main linchpin, whose main policy prerogative is to make sure Americans can have affordable housing. And it can do that at the federal level to ensure that at these local levels and with all these differences between, for example, high housing prices and these issues of zoning can be addressed. Like, for example, I know you don't like me mentioning China, but when China engages in 5-year plans, for example, I'm not saying we're going to have our own, but it's just a broad policy prerogative. It does take into account the various local realities and complexities.
Damn, you got it.
Make it impossible to just pass one bill that's going to be a catch-all to solve like the whole of the geographic and demographic issues surrounding housing reform. So I don't see like how your argument is relevant. The fact that we have a housing crisis in this country isn't only because the reasons you mentioned or because like, oh yeah, it's only about millennials who want to move to big cities. It's about people who don't have a clear future of being able to have their own homes and raise their own families.
I think this is just like, it's like the perfect third party like debate. Like you speak in these like useless empty platitudes. Like, well, the way that you do it is by passing a bill that takes into account all those complexities. Wow. Just, if I just couldn't think of that. Just do a big bill that addresses all the complexities. Jeez, why am I so fucking clueless? Obvious. And at the federal level, nonetheless. The federal level.
Wait. I gave you uninterrupted time to speak. Destiny's going to have his uninterrupted time to speak, and then you're both going to do outros because we were going to wrap up uninterrupted as well. So, Destiny?
I just want to say that I also support really huge, complex bills that just solve all the complex issues, and I think those bills are awesome. I just want to make my position known on that, okay? That's all I got.
Okay. Destiny is glitching out into the Matrix, and now we're going to do
my outro.
Yep. How's you can do your outro?
Yeah, as an outro, I'm going to address the point. I never said that you're going to be able to create a bill that's going to solve all problems. All I'm doing is saying one of the reasons we have housing crisis in this country, or at least one of the reasons that the current political establishment is inept in being able to solve that crisis, is because it's captured by special interests like the real estate muggles and oligarchs and financial institutions and things like BlackRock. And a third party isn't going to be handicapped by those special interests in being able to address the housing crisis. So that's just one example of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about this. A third party isn't a guarantee. All it means is you have a fucking chance. I have never preached any guarantee whatsoever. All I've advocated for is a goddamn fighting chance for the American people. That's all.
Okay. Destiny? And then we'll have the vote. The judges will vote. Destiny?
when you talk to people about third parties, usually they're pie in the sky dreams. People that don't have a good understanding of how the government works, of how policies work, of why some of these issues are so complicated. I can empathize. I used to be the same way. I was a big Ron Paul supporter, abolish the Fed and all that shit when I was a freshman in college. It's really cool to think that there are these really complicated issues that can just be solved with one sweeping, federal legislative initiative. But unfortunately, as you grow older and you look at why things are the way they are, you realize these issues are really complicated. They involve, multiple people fighting on multiple sides of issues in order to get things done slowly over time. That's how the American system is built. And so long as we genuinely remain divided as Americans on a lot of these issues, the government will necessarily remain slow moving when it comes to solving these issues. We don't all agree on how to solve these issues the same way in the United States. That's why there's such a polarization of the parties. That's why there's so much gridlock in Congress. And hopefully in the future this changes, but I know for a fact that the thing that won't change it is fucking third parties.
Okay.
I actually have to go, so so I don't really care about the belt or whatever. So, we good?
If you would like to leave, you can leave.
Okay, for sure. Yeah. See you
Okay.
later. Bye bye.
Okay. So all three judges are Anna, so she will be deciding the result of this debate. No.
Yeah.
The first judge is John Zerka. He is voted in favor of infrared. The second judge is Mr. Geek. He is voted in favor of Destiny. And the last judge is the wonderful and always correct Denabo, and he has voted in favor of Destiny, who retains the belt. Congratulations, you retained the Hippy Dippy Championship.
Wow, thanks a lot. This was just an amazing. This was just amazing. It was everything I thought it would be. It was everything I thought it would be.
Everything you thought it would be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was everything I thought it would be too. So, is there anyone in particular you would like to thank? God, your mom, anyone in particular?
I just Vosh and Hassan for emboldening all these dipshit lefties online that think they could talk about anything. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Is there anybody you would like to challenge for the Hippy Dippy Championship?
Vosh on any topic, or Demon
Vosh,
Mama on
really?
any topic, as long as she can agree not to cry in the 2 hours that we're talking.
Okay. 1 second. Hello?
Hello.
What are you doing here?
Well, I think it's obvious, isn't it? Destiny, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing okay.
I think we both know that there's a destiny for Destiny.
What's that?
Oh, it's you and me having a conversation
Okay.
about the intricacies of the problems of the world and doing it in a much more entertaining way, like you were talking about there with Haas. I mean, that conversation could have went so many different directions. And then to just get stuck on those diatribes. I think you and I could have a much more interesting conversation about something. And I'm on your heels. Just so you know.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind, okay?
Outstanding. Good to see you again.
Good to see you
Destiny,
too.
are you running from CTV, the self-declared people's champion?
I'm not running. I'm ready anytime.
You're not running?
Any place, okay?
You know he worked in a submarine.
It's true.
Have you done that, Destiny? No.
I've eaten a lot of subs from Subway. It's-
That is true. That is true.
Well, am I not surprised that the one thing that you know how to work is your mouth?
I mean, I'm a professional debater, right?
Masturbator.
Indeed. So with that said, we'll set up the meet. CTV out.
See you later, CTV. Thanks for coming on, Destiny.